Well, that's a great moment for me to ask you, how is it that you came to choose Jesus? What was that like for you?
Okay. Loaded. Well,
Yeah.
let's see. My parents, like I said earlier, were divorced when I was 5.
Mhm.
Um, my mother had custody of my brother and I. She then remarried, and my dad had a girlfriend who had kids of her own. So it was sticky on both sides. And
Yeah.
me being the oldest, because then my mother had 2 children from her second marriage, I quickly learned what it was that the adults wanted to hear.
Mm.
And my um, my mother used to send us to my brother and I to my grandmother, her mother, during the summers and stuff like that. I think it was hard for her with a new marriage, new kids. And anyway, while on the Big Island with my grandmother, I was sexually abused by
Mm.
several different men. And, I was 7 at the time. So I had no understanding. And of course, don't tell anybody, you're going to get in trouble. And as a child, I don't want to be
Mhm.
in trouble.
Yeah.
And so things just started to progress. We came up to visit my grandmother during Easter when I was 9. My mother went to Hilo to buy Easter baskets on her own and to pick up her husband who was flying in. And she was hit by a drunk driver. She died on Easter Sunday. So
Wow.
she got into the accident on Friday. And she died Easter Sunday, was like a little after midnight or something like that. And so we ended up, there was this huge custody battle. My Both dads won the 2 kids and 2 kids, so we were torn apart.
Mm. Wow.
Um, the judge ordered my grandmother to have physical custody of my brother and I for a year, and then um, for my dad had legal custody that he'd come and get us in a year, but he never came.
Mm.
So by the time I was 13, coming from Honolulu, coming from a private school to a public school, I got teased, I got bullied. By the time I was 13, I tried to kill myself and wasn't successful. Praise God, he had a plan. He
Praise
had a
God.
plan.
Yeah, praise God.
So, anyways, I remember my stomach. I was so sick in the hospital, and I was just my stomach. I was throwing up. Anyways, I got home. The police came. My grandmother was very old school. She didn't understand. So the whole time she's screaming at me, and the policeman kept asking me, "Why'd you do it? Why'd you do it?" But finally, I just looked up at him and said, "I want to die. I just want to die." Imagine at 13, I just wanted to
It's
die.
terrible, yeah.
Um, by the time I was 15, I was running away after that, running away, doing drugs. By the time I was 15, I got pregnant by a man who was 9 years older than I was. He
Wow.
already had 2 existing kids that I knew of. Um, my dad, who had legal custody, flew over to the Big Island and said, "You're going to marry her." And so we got married. He signed me over. Um,
Wow.
that just started a whole chain of events. He drank a lot, and in those beginning years, I was young. I had no idea. I was pregnant. I had 2 instant kids. I was a kid raising kids. I didn't even know how to cook. I didn't know how to boil
Yeah,
water, you
yeah.
know.
Mhm.
and and then by the time I was 18, literally, I just turned 18, and he had an affair already, and the woman got pregnant. So she and I were pregnant at the second. I was pregnant for my second child, and she was pregnant as well.
Wow.
So I moved out and filed for divorce, which my grandmother paid for because I had no money. I didn't work. And I dropped out of school when I was 15. So while I was staying at my little studio apartment, this girl upstairs, her name was Lonnie. She's since passed. Um, she would come down to my apartment and knock on my door every morning, and I would be with a hangover because I drink. I couldn't cope. I didn't know what to do.
Mhm.
And she'd knock on my door, and I'd open the door, and she'd say, "Can I take you to my friend? My friend will pray for you." And I was like, "No, leave me alone. Ain't nobody praying for me."
Mhm.
And it was like my grandmother, when we were young, took us to these, whatever they call them, kahuna people. She took us to all kinds of people to pray over us and drink strange things. And it was just like witchcraft.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, no, heck no, you ain't the no, ain't
I
nobody
don't want
praying.
that, thanks. Yeah. Mhm.
my daughter had to have surgery. She was little, she was like a year and a half old. And she said, no, she can pray for your daughter too. Ain't nobody touching my kid. But
Mhm.
anyways, finally, I mean, she was persistent. The girl didn't quit.
Yeah. Praise
And
God.
finally, one day I told her, Lonnie, if I go with you this one time, will you promise me that you will never ask me again? And she said, yes. And I said, great, let's go. I'll get
You
her off
got
my
it.
back somehow.
Yes, yes.
So we get to this house and she knocks on the door. She goes, um, Pastor C, we're here. And I hear this voice say, oh, come on in. I'm getting ready. And I was like, okay. So we walk in and I'm looking around. I'm looking around for tea leaves. I'm looking around for funky things, right? And
Mhm.
all I see is a Bible and, some scriptures on the wall. And and I sat down on the couch. And the thing I remember most was there was so much peace in that house.
Praise God.
There was so much peace. And I wasn't used to feeling peace. I mean, I was abused. I just wasn't used to feeling peace.
Mhm. It's
And
different.
so she came walking out of her room with this smile, with this joy of the Lord. I didn't know what it was at the time. And all I saw was this, it was like love just flowing through, a love that I was just like, what is going on? you know?
Yeah.
And she said, hi, I'm Pastor C. And she sat next to me and I was way at the corner hanging on tight to my daughter. And she said, we just believe in Jesus and, da, da, da. And Lonnie tells me your daughter needs surgery. Can I pray for her? And I said, okay, but don't touch us. Is exactly what I said. Okay,
Mm.
just don't touch us.
Yeah.
I had this thing about being touched, because
Mhm.
of being little and being touched.
Mhm.
So anyway, the next thing I know, Lonnie's holding my baby and I'm in her arms weeping, just weeping as she led me to the Lord.
Praise God. That must have been a powerful prayer. Do you remember any of it?
Oh, I do not remember a thing. I just
Really?
remember crying. And I think it was when I was crying because she was praying for my daughter. I don't know how I ended up in her arms instead.
Yeah.
And then she just led me to the Lord. I'm bawling like a baby. And then she said, okay, just repeat after me. So I'm repeating after her. She gave me a Bible. I went back to my apartment, and I must have called her at least a dozen times. Because I would open and I would go, oh my God. And I call her, go, you know what God just told me? And then I'd read somewhere, go, oh my God, you know what God just told me?
I love it. I love it.
I was